Good morning, friends. You may not hear me too much through the horrible drilling in my flats at the moment, but welcome to Friday morning's talks. This morning, another interesting talk with our friend David Saunders, whose title for today, I may have got this wrong, David, but there we go. Funding through buildings, a resilience power network. David.
Great. Thank you, Ray. Thank you, everybody. Well, this is exciting. As you well know, you've had me speak quite a few times before, and I often have a bit of a slideshow. This time, it sort of went a bit crazy whilst I was planning it. You'll be delighted to hear that I haven't managed to make all the slides that I thought I was going to do. I've probably got more than enough for half an hour, and then we've got time to chat amongst ourselves or duck out for a coffee. So I'm gonna, here we go. Okay, so this is my title is Barn, which is Building a Resilience Network, and you've seen, I'm really grateful. I've had the chance to speak to this group several times before, and there's been progress from time to time. And in particular, in February, I was noting that there's been an incredible set of technology shifts with solar energy and electric vehicles and batteries, all advancing by leaps and bounds, making a better economic case for community energy. And that's kind of what I want to talk about today. No, I can't. Right. So what I've been doing is working with a lady called Iris Partridge to build a resilience network. Oh my goodness. Somebody's just calling me there. And so we have a little website for Resilience Network that we've built during the last year. And I think I've got, no, I'm already confusing myself by not having the slides in the order that I would like them to be. So I'll go back to the last one. We built a website during the last year. And most recently, I can say it this way, there was an event organized by the Mayor of the West, or for the Mayor of the West of England, called the launch of Retrofit West. Now, this is a big partnership coming together to do the decarbonisation retrofits. We've got to upgrade all our homes, get them off carbon and onto renewable energy. And it's a really big deal. It's a huge amount of work. So as I say, we're calling on everybody who wants to be involved to hear from our partners. And they had a great agenda. And I went along with, there were 200 or 300 people there. And I've got sort of a joke because one of the first presentations mentioned straight away something about the average energy bill, and said it in France, it's £550 a year, Spain, £530, Germany, 400, all about the same. And then in the United Kingdom, £2,500 a year. Well, you can imagine sort of consternation in the room, but everybody knowing that energy bills have gone up a huge amount in this country. And wow, and I thought, well, that's a really good introduction to the talk, because even if nobody else does anything, we need to do something in this country to bring energy bills back in line. And I made this slide and I got to this point, and then see the asterisk moving, I thought I ought to check this. And so I just looked up in with Google, as you do, and I discovered that that particular piece of data is it's a viral meme that's been going around, and it's been on social media all over the place. But it's not the average energy cost. It's the actual energy cost of in the wholesale price of energy in Europe for a single hour in December 2022. Very, very exceptional time. And that was just 1 hour. And it wasn't the price of energy for a year. It was the price of buying 1 megawatt hour in that hour. So why am I introducing with this? Well, because I meant to, and then I discovered it was the wrong thing. But just to emphasize that it's quite important to get our facts right, and to, work from a very practical basis when we're doing things. And this was announced as if real at a huge event for the whole of the west of England, Quaker, in front, well, I was going to say in front of the West of England Mayor Dan Norris, but he actually turned up late, so he never saw that slide. But we all did. And people were talking about it, and I thought, that's remarkable. I must put that in my talk. And I didn't. Or rather, I did, but I had to backtrack. But I'm looking at three things in this talk, really. And Quaker and Retrofit West is about the duty to decarbonize. Our governments have made a commitment to decarbonize our economies by 2050. And the focus is very much on doing that one way or another. The problem, of course, is that we've left it way too late. And there's a huge buildup of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere. And the first question at that Quaker event, after everybody had done all the talking, the first question from the audience, 200-300 people who were all there on the strength of being invited to come along and talk about training people and all the jobs that was going to be. And the first question was, who's going to pay for all this? And the answer was a bit fluffy, I have to say. Obviously, there are government grants to retrofit homes, but not everybody's got the money to do it. Landlords are being required to upgrade homes, but aren't getting around to do it. And we know if we weaned ourselves off gas in the gas grid, there's 21 million homes in the country connected to the gas grid, and we would have to be installing, I don't know the exact number, but the silly numbers are, we'd have to be converting one house to heat pumps every second from here until 2030 or whenever, go figure. 20 million heat pumps divided by number of seconds in a year equals time to get there. And communities are also looking at the opportunity to electrify, to switch to renewable energy. And the West of England has an outfit for that too. It's called the the Net Zero Hub Southwest. And the other thing is, we're going to have to deal with the consequences. Because we've left it too late, we're increasingly getting catastrophic weather events, and we may well be faced with catastrophic sea level rise at some point. And not everybody's thinking about that. Yes. This is the one I was looking for. At the beginning of January, mid-January last year, I got an email out of the blue from an old chum, Iris Partridge, meet up. Hi, David. I hope you had a good start to the new year. I'm finally getting round to seriously looking at the development of a network of resilient hubs in Bristol, enabling people to keep safe, warm, cool, working, etc., in the event that the grid might be down for anything from a few hours to a few days. Solar is, she knows I'm interested in solar. One of the ways excess energy could be stored to use in this situation. So I'm in the first instance looking at what would need to happen to an existing PV array to harness its energy production when the electric grid is down. So this was an email out of the blue from Iris. Have you got time to talk about this? So we met and we talked. And within a few weeks, or a couple of months, we held an awareness event, and Iris had prepared some slides and written a paper. And the background was, well, the climate emergency and resilience, that community centers and communities are trying to tackle the climate emergency. We're not yet in a position to strongly tackle the shocks that come along. The first shock that Iris talks about is people surviving even through a cold snap. And so we had a network of community centers come together around warm places. And there are ideas of having community places of safety. And Iris is saying, let's work on this. Okay, fair enough. Why not? And Iris is, she's really focused on this and has thought about it a lot. But the questions are, what does it mean for our neighborhoods? Are our neighborhoods resilient? Are we in a position to handle shocks? And how would a resilience network do things in a way that was fair, not just for the rich, but for people people who haven't got so much money, the poor, the socially deprived, people in fuel poverty. And her sort of 3-word things, it's everyday disruption recovery. And, what kind of disruption? Well, you name it. And also you don't name it. But one of the things is, if we're not economically well off, if we have poor neighborhoods, it's not so easy to tackle shocks. So let's gear ourselves up. And at this awareness event, Iris is saying, well, this is how we're going to go about developing a network of resilient hubs. Going to get people to sign up. We'll look at how we can improve community buildings and develop a resilient plan that we'll work on over time. We'll sign up a few well-known, well-resourced, strong community centers as founder members and build from that. We'll work with partners who have resources and ideas like Bristol Energy Co-op, Bristol Energy Network, the Green Capital, the Council's Climate Action, and their Climate Action Fund team, Bristol Disability Equalities Forum, and so on, right? So I'm not going to explain it in great detail, but the National Grid, energy companies, supermarkets, other places that a community comes to in an emergency. So, I sum this up in another talk as the Resilience Network is going to, a few key points. And then we started kicking into, now this is the first of my to be completed slides. We held an awareness event. Iris showed these slides. We brought together a number of community centers. We built some, how would you say, consensus around the idea of a network of resilience hubs. And people like the idea, typically because people running community centers admitted we're stretched just doing the things that we need to do. Normally, often, community hubs are underfunded. And tackling what they need to do for climate change is hard enough. Tackling what you would do in a climate emergency is a step beyond. So we held an awareness event. We we created a logo and then a new logo and built a website, very rudimentary one. that people can at least find us and at least register on. And what else? Right. We held workshops at other people's events during the year. I just held one at St. Anne's Community Centre at an event that was about community capital, community commons. And again, and we started looking for funding, which Irish mentioned in her email to me last February. And it turns out that Bristol has a community energy fund. Bristol City Leap project, which is a £400 million project to create a heat network, has got £1.5 million to help develop community projects. And it's staging the awarding of this money. And as soon as they opened for expressions of interest, we applied. And at that point, they were only awarding grants of £5,000. Later on, they'll be able to more. But we won a grant of £5,000 to help us get started, which is great. And then the Net Zero Hub is administering a government grant scheme called the Community Energy Fund, confusingly, because we already got money from Bristol's Community Energy Fund. But this is a national community energy fund, and we applied for that. And as of last Friday, we were awarded £40,000, which is a nice chunk of money. And it means at the time we were applying for it, we thought we would get that over a year, but we discovered that they're having a second round and that this money is for a feasibility study. So it's for us to look at, could we conceivably create a network and what could we accomplish with it? So as of Friday, we've got this, and this is the first talk a week later. Well, we've already had meetings with potential partners, and we had a kickoff meeting with the Community Energy Fund group, and we had technical partners visit from Yorkshire, and this is going to be good. Right. So in our application, we put together a timeline of the things that we would do over the next 6 months, culminating in writing a feasibility study report and applying for funding to develop a full business plan. And the business plan will be, as you can see just by scanning it, we want to, we're going to be meeting with members, meaning community centres, and partner organisations, meaning people with resources around resilience, like Bristol Energy Network. We're going to hold events. We're going to bring in experts who understand some of the legal issues. You know, the technology is coming on by leaps and bounds, but you're only allowed to put 4 kilowatts of solar on a roof at the moment. And solar panels are getting more and more powerful, and we'd like to put as much solar on roofs as possible. So there are hurdles that we need to tackle. So that's part of our project, is to explore that, and what will the contractual arrangements look like if we put solar on people's roofs. That's the plan. The plan is to work with member community hubs to recruit households in their neighborhoods to put solar on people's roofs, so that we're creating resilience by our idea is that the solar panels we'll put on will still work in the event of an energy cut, which most solar systems won't do. They're tied to a grid in a way that if the mains power dies, then the bit that converts the electricity from the DC direct current made by the panels to match the electric grid, called the inverter cuts out if it can't find the mains and synchronize with it. but you can create a kind of solar system which will keep going quite happily if you've got a battery, and keep your house going through a power cut. So that's more resilient. So that's the kind of thing that we're doing as a resilient network, is planning for better solar installs and more of them. And we're looking at, bringing together installers and all the rest of it. So that's the first 6 months, and then we would plan the business. We will have recruited groups of 10 homes. We want to recruit 10 groups of 10 homes, 5 in each constituency, so that we will build experience in these groups, connected with different community centers. So we're starting to work with a bunch of community centers, and so that we can use that basis to start to scale up. And we've already timeline. What is that? Oh, right, here we go. We've got a timeline for what we would do year 1, year 2, year 3, year 4, year 5, year 6, to build towards having solar on 20,000 roofs, which is a 100 to 200 million pound project. So, and the reason that we produced this graph was because we were already asked if we felt that we could build our project to the point where we would be putting solar on a lot of roofs, because commercial finance is becoming available for this. And if we were going to contact the community, not just people who could afford to pay for their own solar, but people in fuel poverty and social landlords who don't think, well, why should I put solar on the roof of a rental building when I'm not going to get the benefit of it? So we want to tackle all of that. And so we started to think how we get towards 20,000 homes. And I've got funding here. Right. I'm going to get to that in a moment, obviously, because these are just headings. But we've already been approached to be told significant commercial funding is available. And we know that pension funds and asset finance funds are looking to invest in renewable energy. And once we've done a pilot and put solar on 100 roofs and are collecting money from people's energy bills who are paying less, the energy bill goes down because you're buying electricity not from the other end of the country being made at Drax, but you're buying electricity actually from your roof, where the community has conveniently parked part of its local community solar farm. And the technology, there's a whole piece in this presentation that I could do about, which I did last time actually. So it's available in the Energy Snakes and Ladders, but about the power of solar panels going up. Oh, here's a fun one. Oh, I haven't got it. I'll get to it in a moment, a bit more about technology, and show just to show that the timeline fits in. This is all, it's my quick summary of all the things that I've been involved in and other people have been involved in Bristol in the last 10 years or so, when we had feed-in tariffs for community solar, and then saying, well, between now and 2030, we've got to scale up to getting to net zero. And by the time we're at 2028, 2029, 30, it should be really clear that we're going to be having solar across the city, that we're switching all our transport to electric cars and buses, and that we've got plenty of long-term storage, and we've figured that all out. Before that, there's a block where we've got to have a community shared vision. And right now, we're here. We're at the start of 2024, and we are planning. We're planning a pilot. The pilot is on 100 homes, but by 2025, we would want to be, as I had in that last timeline, working towards 20,000 homes, and hopefully rather more than that. See if one of the next slides. Because is it at all feasible? This is what I have been saying ever since about 2012 when I made this graph. We've been seeing that solar technology is growing exponentially, and this is starting to become very visible. Little known fact, last year, the amount of petrol and diesel that we use in the world actually started to go down. It maybe went down by 1%. Next year, it certainly will. How did that happen? Was that because of people gluing themselves to streets in the M25 and saying, we've got to stop oil? No, it was because half the people in the world's biggest country, China, who went to buy a car last year, bought an electric car. And that was up 40% from the year before. And that was enough to turn the tide. So, because many of those electric cars were replacing petrol cars, of course. So the amount of petrol and diesel that we're using started to go down. And that's happening around the world. And we get shocks. I thought I haven't updated this in a while, and I found that, oh, hang on, when I put dots in, they didn't fit my line. But of course, what happened between 2017 and 2022 was COVID. So this curve took a hit and it lagged, but it's actually still on track. We're still growing very quickly towards being just solar generating as much energy as the world needs by 2032. And it's not the only one. Wind is working in the same direction. So sometime around then, or perhaps a little bit earlier, we will be generating more energy than the world needs by renewables. Doesn't mean we'll have replaced all the cars or that there won't be any internal combustion engines around. It means that there will be enough energy being generated for the world's needs by then. And our idea is to, okay, let's get with that program and put solar roofs and electric cars around homes. I've got another bigger piece on technology, but we'll be doing more talks on this. I wanted to just briefly mention the numbers. This is from a spreadsheet that I put together, and it may look a little bit complicated, but it's basically saying if we put 20,000 installations of an average of 6 kilowatt per roof, which sounds like an awful lot to put on a roof, but in 2022, when I did a project, 2012, when I did a project in Lockleys to put solar on roofs, we put an average of 2.7 kilowatts on 23 roofs in Lockleys. But that was 250 watt panels. Now the standard panel size is 440 watts. You can easily get 470 watts. And a company called Yingli, who are China's largest panel manufacturer, is saying, yeah, but solar panels don't actually get all the energy from infrared and ultraviolet. The silicon only picks up the visible light and gets energy from that. And if you put a thin layer of a crystal structure called perovskite, then you can pick up the ultraviolet and the infrared. It will increase panel performance by another 30%. And so we will have 600 watt solar panels. So where 10 panels got us 2.5 kilowatts in 2012, 10 panels will get us 6 kilowatts in a couple of years' time when we're starting to roll this out. It's incredible. We'll throw in a battery, and it looks like we're planning to spend about 150 million. We've been offered commercial finance at a rather higher rate than 5%, but once it's up and running, we know we'll be able to get money from community groups financing their share issues at 4% at the moment, sometimes 3%. And we hope pension funds will kick in around that price. And I've added in, we're talking about taking a tithe from our community, from people will put a penny or two from their energy bill towards the community center. That's how we create resilience in a community center, is we create ongoing income for community centers from the lower energy bills that people have. And you can see if we got energy electricity finance coming in at 5% per year, financed over 20 years, and we're installing at a cost of £800 a kilowatt, which is a bit less than we're paying at the moment, but the cost of installs keeps coming down. We will be able to charge people 12 pence a unit for electricity. You used to pay 16 pence a unit for electricity. Lately, you've been paying more like 30 pence a unit for electricity. But you can see that we're on the bottom right-hand corner there, we're looking at electricity at 8 pence a unit, half what it used to cost, a quarter of what it does cost. And that many homes would create annual energy savings of 16 million a year. That's the savings that those 20,000 homes would have. And an annual income from selling the electricity to households of 14 million, which is enough to pay off the capital cost over 20 years and to maintain the stuff. So basically, we're in our feasibility study. I think I'm just talking you through that, and it sounds probably like gobbledygook. We'll find a way of making the simple pitch to ordinary people will be, if we put solar on your roof, we will be able to sell you electricity for a third to a half off the current price. As we get better and better finance, the cost will come down. As the finance is paid off, the cost will come down dramatically. In 10 or 15 years' time, 20 years' time, electricity will cost 3 or 4 pence a unit. And we will be living in an age of energy abundance, which I really want to talk more about that at some point. But meanwhile, and is there room for solar on 20,000 roofs? Far more than that. Bristol's One City Climate Strategy, that top row there, is talking about 80,000 installations of solar at an average size of 2.3 kilowatts. But that was from the time when panels were 250 watts. So we think we can get, they're talking about 500 megawatts. We're talking, no, panels are much better now. There's room for a gigawatt of solar, 1,000 megawatts. And now this is exciting. Next is a mystery slide. Oh yeah, okay. So this is another talk that I'll give sometime, and it's about when we're looking around and thinking, well, what are we actually going to do? How are we going to get to net zero and cars and batteries and things like that? Once upon a time, the field of mobile phones was a big mess, and people had all kinds of gadgets. You had a music player, and you had a mobile phone, and you maybe had a sat nav for your car, and you had a digital camera. And then Apple came along, and Steve Jobs gets on the stage and says, "We've invented three new devices. It's a widescreen iPod. It's a wonderful smartphone. It's an internet access device." And then he goes on and says, "An iPod, a phone, an internet device." And people start clapping, and he says, "Are you getting it? An iPod, a phone, an internet device." And of course, it's only one thing, everything in one single box. And more Apple hype, works like magic. No stylus, no buttons, right? And doing all these wonderful things. And before 2007, when the iPhone was launched, there wasn't a phone anywhere in the world that looked like this. Since then, there's been a new iPhone every year, and they've all looked like this, and everybody has copied this. So from that date, an innovative new way of doing phones came in, and it's stayed like that ever since. And we think that from roundabout now, we're going to be having lots of solar on our roofs, lots of nice electric cars parked outside with huge batteries, and that will be actually enough to provide most of our energy for the year. And somewhere down at the electricity substation, we'll be connected to the national grid, and we'll be pumping electricity to the national grid during the summer because we'll have a surplus, and we'll be buying it in during the winter. And there are other people who've got ideas for long-term storage. So, and that picture with the iPhone is based on, this is my history of working in tech. And you can see around about 2007, the iPhone came out and everything changed. And Steve Jobs died a few years later. And we're saying, we think the same kind of revolution is going to happen with solar energy. And somewhere in round about 2022, which is about now, we'll see all these things coming together: smart grids, hydrogen, electric cars, whole streets of solar. And that's what we're planning now with the Resilience Network. It's exactly what we're planning right now. The pilot project, I was going to have a whole slide about that, but the idea is 10 groups of 10 homes doing different versions of this so that we'll experiment with 100 homes on what works best before we think about scaling up. And then, this is my parting slide. What are our core values? Our core value is community-owned renewable energy. And when the inevitable question comes, well, surely there's a whole other number of ways that we can do this, and there's all kinds of blockers that are going to come along. We've already done that talk, but it turns out that once you hit this form factor like the iPhone, where you say, well, everybody's going to have a piece of consumer electronics, some solar on their roof, access to an electric car with a big battery, and that will be standard. There isn't any need for, there will be loads of other gadgets, just as you have, hundreds of apps on your iPhone. But the basic hardware that we will use in our communities will be solar roofs and electric cars. And the way that we hook it all up together will just get smarter and smarter. So I was going to talk about stages where, because there are all these snakes and ladders to get there, but the very first stage works if we just put solar on people's roofs, and then a battery, that might be the second stage, and then an electric carpool outside, that might be the third stage, and then sharing the storage between houses, and then sharing the solar between houses. You can, there's just been announced a piece of kit developed in Australia that says, well, if you've got an apartment block or like a retirement home, which is sort of low-rise building with lots and lots and lots of flats, just put one single big solar array on the roof and use this splitter box called a sol share and divide the energy up fairly between the people in the building. And that includes, oh, well, look, it's the middle of the day. Half the homes aren't using any electricity at all. But some of them are doing their washing because we've trained them to do their washing during the day, and we'll direct the electricity to the houses that are using the energy, and so on. So sharing energy is a way to make the best use of our energy. And we'll figure out ways of doing it. And at the end of all this, we hope that our communities won't look unrecognizable at all. You'll just see solar roofs everywhere you go, and there'll be cars parked in the street and kids playing. And there won't even necessarily be big wires snaking all over the street, because just as you can now charge a phone wirelessly, you can, there are electric cars being built already, or at least electric lorries, that are charged by pads that are under the roadway. So you just drive up to your car parking spot. You don't plug in a wire. You're just sitting over a inductive coupling thing. I think we're near the end. Are we near the end? Oh, yeah. Well, here's just a summary. So the idea is we bring together our communities through their community hubs, and with help from all the expert groups in the city, and with help from the council and funding from groups who are good at funding this kind of thing. And we will end up with a community with a largely community generated energy supply, and with huge savings. At the moment, Bristol uses about £870 million worth of energy a year. And most of that, the money for that, kind of goes up the M32 and ends up in London and isn't used in Bristol. But if we're generating our own energy, that 800 million a year is staying in Bristol, half of it or a quarter of it paying off the cost of our rooftop solar, but the rest of it coming in as savings for everybody and as surpluses for our community centres. So that is the purpose of Resilience Network, and it's where we've got in the first year. We're right at the point of got some funding, going to engage with community groups, going to start planning the rollout. There you go.
I think that's fantastic myself. I really do. I still think I'm in the wrong kind of home at present, in that I'm in an old ancient Victorian house where I've got an upstairs flat, and it's powered currently by gas central heating, and I feel the cold, and I'm not prepared to put myself forward as a guinea pig for being sitting in the cold. But seriously though, I just wish when they do trials when they would try and work out how this is going to work, I would really love it if people like me in living places like me could be included, rather than just people in new builds and so on, which are going to be an easier job to convert. Don't know if you've got views on that, though, Dave.
It's lovely, Patsy. Whenever you sort of, I sort of come along with this sort of blithe, top-down view of everything being perfect. But if it was, it will have impacted everybody individually, one way or another. I live in a flat that's poorly insulated, and it's got space heaters, and they power up with cheap electricity at night, and they don't heat the rooms at all well. And so there's grant funding coming available. If you took the time to call up the Retrofit West or the Centre for Sustainable Energy, you would be told about what grants might or might not be available to you. And then you would go through the endless hassle, or unendless, it might be very easy, I don't know. There are people who have got jobs to help people. It might work if you own your place. It might not work if you're a tenant, and you might have to put your landlord at them. And these things, most of us, and I include myself, haven't got the bandwidth. We're too busy just surviving, right? And that's not easy at the moment. So part of the idea of putting together a resilience network is to have a center of excellence with a cup of tea at a community center in your area that is inviting you and your chums to come to events to learn about what's possible and what's on offer, right? And that might include if the council has suddenly got some grant money, great. We'd say, well, we want to do a cluster of 8 homes who are the most needy. And it isn't, did you happen to get a flyer through your letterbox like I did recently from the council? And brilliant, we've got money to retrofit 250 homes. Yeah, well, you should be talking to my landlord, and my landlord might not be wanting to do this right now. So the idea is, if you have a resilience network, it will be thinking about this, and it will be arranging some of the finance and some of the, so we can easily arrange the finance for solar energy, because when you put solar energy on people's roofs, it generates enough electricity that if you sell it to people or the grid, you get more money back than it costs to put the solar on the roof. That's why people are getting flyers through their doors at the moment saying, oh, solar, you know, blah, blah, blah. And thinking, well, I'm not sure I trust this. And you, in my experience, you'd be right to be uncertain, because my sister got free solar in 2011 or 12 or something like that, had some problems. And by the time she had some problems, the company that put the solar on her roof wasn't in business anymore.
Exactly.
And it doesn't help to have a guarantee from that company if that company doesn't exist anymore. But we're starting to get guarantees from the solar panel manufacturers, saying, we will guarantee the solar panel on your roof, and we will guarantee, and you're saying, well, it's all very well, but what about the work that's needed to be done? They'll guarantee the work to do it. They will organize somebody to come along and get your solar panels running again. And we will orchestrate that and make sure it happens on a community center by community center basis across the city. That's the plan. At the moment, you know, we are one whole week. It was at the end of last Friday afternoon, so it's not quite one whole week. It's nearly a whole week from just getting some money together to do a feasibility study. But we wouldn't have got that money if we hadn't presented a fair summary of what we want to accomplish, which is what I've been telling you about. And so, yeah, exactly right. Understood. The whole point of the network is to understand the kind of problem that you've got, to create skilled, knowledgeable centers of expertise. You know, we would like to fund somebody in every community center who is an energy consultant, who is recruiting streets at a time to have solar, and figuring out which people, if the government's got grants for further work that doesn't make money, like retrofitting homes, they're organizing that as well, helping organize it so that people who, you know, I haven't got the time to try, you know, I haven't got the time to find out if there's something for my house. I don't really want the disruption anyway. And we have Jeffrey, our lovely ex-clerk, was explaining how you can do retrofit street by street. What he didn't do was explain how you would organize people street by street. And we're saying, well, from their community center, by creating your community center as a resilience hub.
Can you see a time in the future, David, where people who build new houses will be legally obliged to put solar panels as standard on any house that they build?
Well, and insulate homes properly as well, Ray. All of that. At the moment, it's being written into legislation rather haphazardly. So, you know, you have a duty to do X or Y, and the builders will do the absolute minimum they can get away with, as has always been the case. And I think,
you hear them talking to each other saying so, overhear them.
no, you know, it's no surprise. All of our Western capitalist economy, you know, it's ever since Saint Margaret organized the sell-off of all our nationalized industries and all the nation's treasures to commercial interests, so that we now have raw sewage in our seas, and the British Olympic swimming team has to go and practice in other countries. We have been scandalously affected by having irresponsible governments who are out to plunder the country's riches for the elites. This has to be reversed. But if it isn't going to be reversed by the governments, it can be reversed by our communities. We can empower ourselves and democratize. The whole point of who's going to own these solar panels on our roofs? Our idea is to create a cooperative. And if you have solar panels on your roof, or you are buying electricity from the company, which might be a community company, or if you're buying electricity from this shared community solar resource, you are a member of a cooperative that is owning this. And it's, how come, we're going to be ripped off, aren't we? No, no, no. You're going to be a member of the co-op that's operating this, and you will get to vote on whether you want the prices to go up or go down, whether you want to give loads of profit to elites and plutocrats, or whether you want to subsidize your community and help it be more resilient and thriving. So it's actually a mechanism to introduce an element of local democracy. And that's partly why we're having a pilot with 10 groups of 10 homes. We want to put 2 groups of 10 homes in each constituency, so that we're already engaging right from the start with all of our local MPs, so that when they go up to Westminster, they know what we want.
I mean, how is this going to work when all the rules are framed the other way?
Brute force and ignorance, Marion. The rules may all be framed the other way. There are many, there's a whole bunch of people doing what's called direct action to try and oppose the current system with varying degrees of success. I believe that it's a more direct form of action to install the system that's going to replace the old system. If you ask this government to introduce renewable energy and everything, they'll do stuff and then cynically undo it. Like they've just announced that they're going to allow drilling for oil in the North Sea in the areas that they've reserved for wind, right? So, that's what pitchforks were invented for. You get, a few thousand people to show up at your local council or your local party office and say, no, we want things put right. But better than that is to say, no, the hell with that. Let's just put in an energy system that's reliable, renewable, that's got the answers that we want, not some sort of haphazard mishmash that's been put together reluctantly by politicians who are trying not to upset energy companies and vested interests. And the whole point of my Apple analogy is there was a time when computers were big mainframe computers, and IBM was the world's biggest consolidated computer company. And the chairman of IBM stood up at a conference in Armonk, their headquarters in New York, and said, gentlemen, it's going to be possible to build a computer the size of an attaché case, as small as that. Our challenge is going to be getting people to pay $250,000 for it, because that's what we'll need to do. And over the other side of the country, there are 2 guys sitting in a garage saying, Steve, because they're both called Steve. One was Steve Jobs and the other was called Steve Wozniak. Steve, it's going to be possible to build a computer for $600. And all kinds of enthusiasts will love it. And they built it and they sold hundreds of them, and Apple was born. And there came a time when they were saying, it's going to be possible to stuff that computer that used to be big inside something as small as a mobile phone and revolutionize communication. And long before that day, IBM had filed the biggest corporate loss that any corporation had ever made, because they weren't able to persuade people to pay $250,000, and Apple were able to persuade people to pay $600. So the old giants, they go away. The introduction of the automobile, there was incredible lobbying, do you know, from the horse industry. Industry. You know, there was a vested interest at the time. And there's wonderful pictures you can find. There's a picture of New York and all these horse-drawn carriages going down the street. It doesn't show the horse shit on the roads, but it was there. And one bus with a petrol engine in it, right? Horse-drawn carriages and one bus. And then a picture 10 years later, and everything, and with one horse-drawn vehicle. So in 10 years, from one petrol vehicle, 10 years later, one horse vehicle. And that's what will happen with energy. We are at the end of the age of petroleum, and already the amount of petroleum and diesel being consumed is going down. Unfortunately, it's still a record level of emissions, and that's still going into the atmosphere. And so we're going to have to deal with an atmosphere that has been turned highly toxic from a century of emissions, and that is capable of, you know, disrupting life on planet Earth, melting ice caps and so on. So we'll have to deal with that. But the first step one, is to decarbonize and electrify both. And then in that step, hopefully we make our communities resilient and clean energy based. And then they're resourced well enough to be able to tackle the shocks from climate change, which are still going to be hitting us in the next years. Marion.
I've got two questions, but probably because I wasn't able to make it to the beginning. I came in at a slide that said it compared energy prices in the UK and other countries, and the energy price in the UK was many times that of anywhere else, and I don't understand why. And the second question was, somewhere flashed across the screen something about managing the iPhone barrier, and I didn't know what that meant. So if you could tell me about those two things, I'm grateful.
Two things. So the first one was I was going to I was at the launch event for Retrofit West, and they flashed up a slide. They showed a slide showing the dramatically higher cost of energy in the UK than in.
But why is that?
Well, it turned out that it was a hoax, or not a hoax. It wasn't the annual energy cost. It was the cost of energy wholesale for one particular hour in one particular year. But the truth is, it was one of these hoaxes, you know, like a lot of the news that people like Trump put out, fake news. A lot of fake news has got something that triggers people because there's a kind of bit of truth lurking behind it. And we are paying twice as much for energy as we should do, because we have a badly organized price mechanism, which is that in this country, the grid asks people to bid to generate energy for the grid. And people put in their bids, and once the national grid has got enough bids for all the energy we need at that moment, it accepts that bid and no more, and then it pays everybody else that same top price. So the people who had a lower price get a bonus, which is great. But so there was a time when for some reason the cost of electricity basically went through the roof. Oh, Ukraine, Putin, right? And all the energy, and basically everybody said, oh, this is nice. Let's keep that going for as long as we can. So we are paying through the roof. And the government said we're going to put a price cap on electricity. And most energy companies said, oh, there's a limit to how much we can charge. Let's charge that. Not, we don't need to charge that, but let's charge it. So there's a lot of silliness going on behind the screens, and I'm not an expert, but I do know that the price that you are paying for your electricity is a lot more than it costs to generate renewable electricity. And so I'm simply saying, let's get to that point where we are generating as much of the energy as we need as possible from renewable sources and selling it to ourselves. And the iPhone moment that I was mentioning is the moment when everything changed. People sort of don't realize it, but in 2007, before 2007, every phone that you bought had buttons on it to dial the numbers, even if it's a smartphone, so-called. And once that phone was manufactured, it was no good for sale in a country that didn't have those numbers or letters or whatever. And the phones were getting smarter and smarter. They could have an address book in them and so on. But nobody had the thought, I'm going to put a whole computer inside a phone, and I'm going to put a general purpose operating system inside the phone, and I'm going to let it do pretty much everything that a computer can do. And I'm going to throw in a camera, and in a couple of years' time, I'm going to throw in location sensing, so that instead of having a mobile phone and a digital camera and satellite navigation and maybe a music player, all of a sudden you bought one thing and it had everything. And that's what I call the iPhone moment. And it goes with the other classic moment, which was the Kodak moment, which is that Kodak, who basically invented film photography, also invented digital photography. And then they decided not to promote that, to stick with film. And they lost the business because digital photography overtook. So Apple was saying, oh, you're going to be able to get a phone. You're going to be able to put a computer inside a phone. People will stop buying Macintoshes. They said, all right, let's make the phone. Make sure that they buy it from us, right? And that is the smart way to do it. So that's the iPhone, and I'm saying there's an iPhone moment coming. At the moment, we've got, it's like you all got these questions, you know, how am I going to decarbonize my house? How am I going to do this? And there's a whole bunch I haven't said. There's a wonderful way of heating the home called low frequency infrared heating. And it's basically a wallpaper that you don't even put on the wall. You put it on the ceiling. And you just put it in the ceilings around your house. And you connect it to a low voltage electricity and a little pad somewhere, and you just, you know, key in which zones of your house you want to be warm, lovely and warm, with this low cost, low frequency infrared heating.
I think that's used at Redland, actually, isn't it?
Yeah. Lots of churches have got stuff suspended in the ceiling that radiates heat downward, and there's less obtrusive forms of that aren't actually using radiant heat. Yeah, you're right.
And it was Mark Spring that when they were trying to, it solves the kind of the conundrum of the fact that the boiler had packed up, but that, you know, ground source heating was too expensive and not feasible for the meeting house in its location. And he said, what about this? What about this infrared thing? And so that was like kind of also it turned out to be the kind of the least expensive option.
Yeah.
Yes. Could I mention, Marion, considering that you're also a member of Henleys Lake?
Mm-hmm.
When I was on the committee, I suggested new heating in the meeting room, and I said infrared, and it was installed on the wall. And I think 2 or 3 years later, they took it down because they thought it was a waste, because people switched it on and it was left on. They did have a timer, and the timer was installed too high for people to press it again easily. I mean, they were pissed off with it, but actually I'm sure that it was the cheapest way of heating that space, because you just switched it on when you went in and switched it off when you went out.
Well, which is why I described having, you know, you have smart.
Yeah, dial it up.
You have smart controls, and there's another form of there's a form of insulation called aerogel, which is
Oh yeah, don't know.
incredibly efficient insulation. It has been quite expensive, but a 10 millimeter coating of aerogel will improve the efficiency of a wall by double or more. And so, you know, there are all these little high-tech things. People, having said we've got to decarbonize, people have come bludgeoning in, saying, oh, we've got to shut down the gas grid, and so on. And even that isn't necessarily true. There's a way of making gas from silage. So you get your farmers to grow really rich biodiverse grasses as we shift gradually to being more and more vegan and not raising crops to feed cattle to eat them. You grow these grasses, you grow protein-rich grasses, which you extract food value from, and then you turn that, you keep that silage till the winter, and you make gas with it, and you put that in the gas grid. And so you don't stop people using boilers. You merely start feeding them a gas that's part of a renewable cycle, renewable energy cycle, because you're burning methane, biogas, to carbon dioxide, but in the summer that's being picked up and turned back into silage and going round a loop. Hattie, does that answer
Well,
that?
we were in Wales the other day, and we were walking across a couple of fields, and they'd already harvested their wheat. It was all green. It had not matured, but the heads were very long. I mean, they were nearly almost, well, certainly 7 inches long. And we just couldn't make out why had they harvested it at this time of year before it's ripe. I mean, it must have been planted in winter or before winter. I don't understand it yet. I don't know if it's anything to do with an experiment.
I have absolutely no idea.
No.
What I do know is that there are good solutions for everything we want. And once you show these things to people and make them clear, and you've got through the first couple of iterations of it not working quite right, then everybody gets with the program. I mean, you may not remember the time around 2007, but there were people saying, well, I'd never get a smartphone. What's the point of a smartphone? You know, I mean, I only need a phone to make phone calls. And now
you mentioned something there, David, which I think is controversial, and I'm willing to actually throw this forward, is that you say when the time when everybody becomes vegan, the controversy over that is something which is going to roll on for quite a number of years, although you might not agree with it. The desire for people to eat meat of some kind or other will continue with us for quite a long time, because there are some who believe that man is carnivore, and you know that should be something which we take forward. You know, even to growing meats in factories or something like that. You know, that type of thing will happen to placate some others who don't see themselves as vegetarian rather than vegan.
well, lovely. And you're saying it's controversial. It isn't for me because I don't mind. So, you know, I'm not going to pick a fight with you, Ray.
No, I'm not trying to get you to pick a fight with me. I'm just saying it's something which is going to happen.
I'm just saying, if you want to, if you want to see controversy, fine. But it's better to me that people experiment and explore these things. As you've already said, there are wonderful technologies coming out for growing foods with all the quality of meat in vats. And so, you know, we have obviously got to, I mean, the point is that the meat food that we eat is meat that is being raised on food that's been poisoned, right? The meat is poisonous.
Yeah.
So what we actually need is neither a vegetarian diet, nor a vegan diet, nor a meat diet, but a healthy diet,
Yeah.
and a balanced diet. And if you grew up in Japan, you would have gone to school where, and you would find that there was a teacher who was trained on top of their teacher training to teach food and nutrition, and the children grow up making their food from scratch every day with fresh ingredients. And so in Japan, they don't have a problem of obesity because they learn at school how to make healthy food and so on. So there are lots of things that we could put right. I'm just deciding to pick one of them that will transform our economy. And once you've transformed the economy by stopping the rip-off, and starting to provide goods and services that are, locally prepared, fresh, sustainable, including energy, locally prepared, fresh energy that is sustainable at a price that we can afford, then people start to get the idea that, maybe the rot that started with the Thatcher government can be stopped, and we can bring back control. Not from Europe, but from the elites who are ripping us off and cheating us of proper lives.
One
Yes.
of the things which that bring back control is something, a very tiny thing, which an MP once said to me, who was quite a consciously decent chap, said that people should remember that your MP works for you. You don't work for them.
But if you actually look, you'll find that a lot of MPs get most of their funding from commercial interests. And in America, the phrase, so here's one that I heard from America, and it's a good politician is one who, once he's been bought, stays bought.
Once he's been what?
Once he's been bought,
Oh,
as in paid for by, if there are 5 lobbyists from the petroleum industry for every single senator in the United States, how much good do you think it does to ask people, write a letter to your congressman and ask him to promote renewable energy? Because those lobbyists aren't just talking to the congressman and the senator, they're making sure that they get funded through their political action committees. And that happens in this country just as much. And our prime minister is a rich plutocrat, oligarch. So, how do you think things are organized? So, yeah, he's all for having a net zero country. But by the way, I'm going to allow continued extraction of oil from areas of the North Sea designated for wind. So, I'll say something one moment and do what my backers want me to do the next. So, wait for the next election, chaps, and make sure you vote.
I need to go.
But I have been chairing a socialist environment group, and my theme has been you can't trust the government. And the socialists, we had a Green New Deal under Corbyn, and that disappeared completely. And then we had the clean energy superpower with Keir Starmer, and it's going to invest 28 billion a year, and then that disappeared. Now, so when they're elected, are they going to do the right thing or not? Well, I don't know, but let's do the right thing in our community. We can arrange to get an inward investment of 100 million to put solar on 20,000 roofs. And after we've done that, we can arrange for a few more 100 million to put solar on the remaining 80,000 roofs. And then we'll be generating most of our energy that we use domestically and for transport, and what we aren't using in the instant, we will have found ways to store it for when the sun doesn't shine at night and in winter.
Right. Thank you, David. As it is now 20 past the hour,
Oh, wow. Sorry.
it is time for us to go to different things, which I'm sure we have to do whether we like to or not.
Lovely.
But
Thank you.
next week, may I express it's an interesting next week, is our friend Sue Tuckwell, who hasn't been with us before, but is a lovely lady. I've met her and known her for quite a few years now. She's talking on Fair Trade at 30 in Cuba and around the world. Do
Great.
come and be informed of this very interesting subject. And as I said before, tell everybody else in your meeting.
Bye.
Lovely. Thank you, Ray. Thank you, everybody.
Okay.
Thank you very much indeed.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I love
Thank
coming
you.
to these meetings.
Thank you, David. Thank you.